Hello, this is Chris from Tamebay. I'm just giving people a chance to log in and we'll be starting the webinar shortly. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chris from Tamebay. We'll be starting the webinar in 1 minute. A very good afternoon to everyone. This is Chris from Tamebay. We've got a very interesting webinar today because it is based on the results of our reader surveys. So we recently surveyed yourselves to find out what opportunities you saw for international growth and what challenges you were facing. And I'm delighted to introduce Bobby, who's Group Marketing Director for GFS, who's got a huge amount of international experience and is going to be taking the webinar today. If you do have any questions, you'll see a question panel where you can type your questions in, and we'll either answer them during the webinar or come back to you at the end of the webinar. So please do feel free to participate. For those of you who want to re-listen to the webinar, we will be recording it today, so you'll have an opportunity to listen again. But without further ado, let me hand you over to Bobby, who's here to take us through some of the findings from the survey. So good afternoon, Bobby.
Good afternoon, Chris, and thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today, who's listening in. And as Chris said, we're going to be we'll be covering some of the findings from the survey. And bear with me 1 second. You should be able, I just want to check that everybody can see the next slide. No. Chris, can I just check that you are able to see the next, can I just check which slide you are actually seeing? Just bear with us 1 second, people, while we fix this. Here we go. And there we are. Thank you very much, Mo. Okay, so hopefully everyone, you should be seeing just an introduction slide. I do apologize for my picture, but like Chris said, my name's Bobby Toulis. I'm Group Marketing Director with Global Freight Solutions. Maybe you haven't heard about Global Freight Solutions, but we are, quite simply put, we provide value-added managed parcel services to the UK and globally, and we work with some of the biggest and fastest growing e-commerce brands in the UK. My background is in global sales and marketing, and you can see some of the companies that I've worked for. But the question I'm always grappling with and always trying to solve is, how do we sell more? And hopefully we'll be covering some of the things that you'll also be thinking about when you're asking yourselves, how are you going to grow, not grow your e-commerce sales internationally. So if we come on to the next slide, let's look at what areas we'll be covering. So the first question is the fundamental one about international expansion. Why now, and what about Brexit? In order to grow internationally, you obviously need to be asking questions such as, where are the e-commerce opportunities, in which markets, which marketplaces, also which product categories, And then we'll also be sharing some of the insights and learnings that we took from the International Seller Survey that Chris mentioned, where we went out to all of you back in August and asked questions around where your focus was for international expansion, but also what you saw as the key barriers and challenges in that. So let's move on quickly without further ado. The big question, why international expansion now? Why is it a must rather than a maybe? Certainly when we speak with customers, it comes down to two big pressure points. The first is Brexit. That awful, every time we mention the word Brexit, you can see people's, getting comfortable in their seat. So first and foremost, it's about the pressure of Brexit, the uncertainty, and what steps companies can be putting in place to protect revenues or the potential loss of revenue that they get today in the EU. And more positively, it's also about being able to tap into the exciting growth opportunities. And as we'll touch on later in this webinar, some of the biggest e-commerce opportunities are outside of the EU. So one is about protecting revenue, and the other is about growing revenue and tapping into those exciting growth prospects. And now's a great time because not only does Brexit give us that impetus to take this seriously, but also it's a time when UK sellers, there's actually a drop in UK SMEs who are selling abroad. So there's less competition, but also with the exchange rate and weaker pound, that makes UK products far more attractive to international buyers. But whilst you're not going to stop selling in Brexit because of Brexit, it's not going to stop you from selling into those countries. You do need to be thinking about how you're going to adapt your approach to new market conditions. And certainly, such as longer shipping times to the EU due to new and potentially more onerous customs processes, or even potential loss of access to the single market and global free trade agreements. As we inch closer to a Brexit agreement, now is the time when you really should be speaking with your suppliers to get some clarity on what they're going to be doing to support you through this. And certainly, it's something that at GFS we've been working on Brexit plans with our customers for many months now, both in terms of defending current revenues in the EU, but also, more importantly, helping them tap into new markets, new countries, and being able to increase and grow their overall sales. So talking of the e-commerce opportunity, which are the biggest e-commerce markets? So if we look at it in terms of value of market, unsurprisingly, as many of us will know, China is by far the biggest, valued at about $499 billion. And that's closely followed by the USA at around $409 billion. And these figures are slightly out of date. They're from 2017, so there could be some variation. And the rest, if we look at it in terms of top 10, then UK is third, followed by Japan, Germany, France, all the way down to South Korea, Russia, Canada, and Brazil. And this is impacted not just in terms of how much people are spending on online purchases, but also in terms of internet penetration. So how many internet users are there? That's going to impact how much e-commerce sales are going on, but also how quickly those markets are growing. And we see here that Russia is ranked at number 8 at around $27 billion. And Brazil at number 10 at $18 billion. Interestingly, they are also some of the most important e-commerce markets in terms of rate of growth. So if we now look at the important e-commerce markets by rate of growth on the next slide, what we see is that Russia is the fastest growing at around 20% year-on-year growth. There's around 85 million internet users in that market. And following Russia is Brazil that we mentioned earlier, growing at about 8%, 140 million internet users, but it also represents the largest e-commerce market in South America. And then we get a bit closer to home with Turkey at 7 billion, growing at 10%, around 10% per year. But the Netherlands, which is growing at very fast at around 23%. So you not only need to be thinking about the e-commerce opportunity in terms of where are the biggest value markets, but also it's an opportunity to think about which are the fastest growing and make sure that you're not going to be missing out on that opportunity as well. So we've seen where the biggest markets are in terms of value and in terms of rate of growth. Clearly, looking at online marketplaces is an important part in your sales mix and strategy. And when we look at the biggest marketplaces, then unsurprisingly, you see that they also map to the biggest territories as well, the geographical territories. So we've got number one, and forgive me if I say this wrong, Taobao. Chris, you probably, how would you pronounce that one, Chris?
It's literally Taobao.
Taobao, thank you very much. So Taobao, Tmall, Amazon, eBay, JD.com, no surprises there, which together, if we look at 2017 figures, account for $1.47 trillion of global spend in online marketplaces. So it's a huge, huge market, again, for you to be able to tap into to reach those e-commerce consumers and put your products in front of them. But competition in these marketplaces is going to be fierce too. So you need to also be thinking how you're going to differentiate your product from other sellers on those marketplaces, or maybe even looking at selling in some of the smaller, more emerging marketplaces where the competition is less. You also need to be thinking about your product categories. So which products sell best in each market? Now, this slide shows us the information taken from the latest UK sellers report from eBay. So it's looking at where UK sellers have been selling the most, in which markets, but also in which categories. So when you're thinking about marketplaces, and when you're thinking about which countries to be going into, think also about what product category your product is in, because some products are going to sell faster and better than others in different markets. One thing that's consistent when we look at these figures is that there seems to be a strong and consistent appetite for British clothing, shoes and accessories in most markets, but there are also some marked differences. So in Germany, eBay Germany, they come to UK, they look for UK sellers of vehicle parts and accessories. In France, they also look for vehicle parts and accessories, but they also look for toys, hobbies, and other craft type things. So think about what product category you're in and where there's demand, as it will vary from market to market. So that's just some very high level key stats, key facts and figures, which will hopefully help you stimulate some of your thinking around your game plan for how you're going to be increasing your international sales. Now let's switch over to look at some of the findings and learnings we got from the survey that we did recently. So This is the International Seller Survey, which we conducted with Tamebay. So this went out to everybody on Tamebay, all the Tamebay seller members. So this ranged from e-commerce businesses from 1 million up to 50 million and above in terms of annual turnover. And these were all respondents based in the UK. So the first question we wanted to ask was to really get a sense of the level of ambition, how important international sales was going to be over the next 2 years for the online sellers. And unanimously, 76% responded to say that they expect international revenues to increase over the next 2 years. And almost a fifth of those respondents expect that growth to be quite significant. When we look at where do they see the opportunity, without a doubt, USA is seen as the number one opportunity, and by far. So 64% have said the biggest opportunity that they see is in the US, so that's where they're going to be headed. And that's followed by Australia at 17% and China at just 13%. So although China is the number one e-commerce market in the world, some of you are still shying away from there. So that was very interesting. What was also before I go on to delivery, another point which I found as interesting was that the contrast between the clear ambition to grow international revenues significantly and outside of the UK in markets such as the US specifically. But then when we asked about revenues today, the reality is very different from the ambition in that for the majority of respondents, international revenues is less than 10% of their overall revenues. And of that international revenue, most of that is still within the EU. So what that shows is that there is a clear ambition for growth, specifically outside of the UK and outside of the EU. But there is quite a gap in terms of the gap in revenue that they're trying to close, and also a gap in where they are today in terms of countries they are selling in today. When we asked about what did they see as the biggest barriers or the biggest challenges to growth, as you'd expect, duties and taxes was right up there at number one. No surprises there. But right behind that came delivery. So 36% said duties and taxes was the number one challenge for growth when they thought international growth. But delivery is right up there as as perceived as the second biggest barrier to international growth after duties and taxes. So when we probed a bit further to understand exactly what is it about delivery that is difficult for these businesses, for e-commerce businesses, what we found was that it really rested around the complexity around the cost of carriage, but also the lack of expertise around which carriers to use for which markets. So at this stage, what I wanted to do was just try and continue along the track of clearly, obviously about delivery, and try and share some pointers or share a quick checklist which you may find useful to give you some pointers in some of the areas around delivery and what you can be thinking about to make sure you get international delivery right for your e-commerce business. What we're looking at here is really a menu of the types of services and options that are out there for you to be thinking about when you're to get your parcel from you to your customer anywhere in the world. And this can be really overwhelming because there really is a world of options in terms of thinking about what mode is it road, is it sea, is it air, what speed, fast, express, next day, slow, what cost. These are all really key questions that you should be asking, and in some cases, look to your product and your customer. And just to give you an example of what I mean, we work with some, high-end luxury fashion brands, and given the cost of what they're selling, the value of their product, and the quality of their brand, that one of the most important delivery modes for them is Air Express. So the customer gets the experience which they expect when they receive their parcel.
We've actually had a question come in, Bobby. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
rather more of a comment than a question, which
Yeah.
is from Carl Smith. Cost as a percentage of the order value is his biggest challenge. If they're only sending an order worth, say, £25, he says it's difficult to get a decent price tracked delivery option. I
Mm,
wonder if you could talk a little bit while we're talking about the balance of mode, speed, and cost
yeah.
on what options are there out there for relatively low value items, specifically on tracked deliveries.
Mm. So there are products out there. There are specific e-commerce, services which are designed specifically for e-commerce businesses, such as perhaps cars, which will help them strike the right balance between, you know, um, the cost of delivery, but also the service, the speed. So get the find the middle point between what is express and what is slow in terms of speed. So it's an acceptable speed at an acceptable cost, and it's also tracked. There are those services available. I can't comment on what our competitors offer, but I can certainly, in fact, later in this presentation, I can talk about our e-commerce delivery option. So you need to be shopping around and find out what delivery options are being provided specifically for e-commerce businesses and businesses that are typically selling on marketplaces where the average order value might be $20, $30, $40, and people expect, your customer is expecting a good service, a trackable service, because they want to know where their parcel is, but they don't want to be spending too much on delivery. I hope that's
Yeah.
answered the question.
Yeah, I hope that helps, Carl. And if you stick around till the end of the presentation, we'll get Bobby's contact details up on screen so that
Mm.
you can talk offline later.
Sure, brilliant. Thanks for that, Carl. Okay, so you need to think about mode, speed, cost of delivery options. And then the next thing, and perhaps critically, especially now that everybody says Amazon has raised the bar in terms of your digital customer expectations. They want everything yesterday. It's not just about speed. Yes, Amazon has raised the bar in terms of what customers expect from delivery, um, but it's not about just speed, right? It is about choice and being able to offer customers a broad choice of delivery options is absolutely important because customers want convenience. And what you don't want to do is give them one or two options and think that you're going to second guess what option is going to suit them. Our principle has always been offer the broadest choice of delivery options that you can so that your customer can be allowed to select the option that suits them best. And if you get that right, as research shows, it will have a direct impact on your sales conversions, cart abandonment rates, and repeat sales. So the bottom line is, delivery does matter, but work with your delivery partner to look at how you can offer the breadth of choice to customers But at the same time, obviously, you need to be also thinking about what makes commercial sense for your business. Now, delivery is not a one size fits all. Okay, just as when you're looking at new markets to go into, you're thinking about how do you localize your sales and marketing approach. Equally, you need to be thinking about how you're going to localize your delivery to suit your customer in each of those markets. And there are nuances in every market. And when we think about delivery, from our experience, we know very clearly that if we're advising customers about how to get parcels into some of the less developed markets, we would not for a moment be recommending local postal services. We might be recommending some of the more premium services to ensure, as we know, it's the only way the parcel's going to get there safely and reliably. Similarly, there are cultural differences. For example, in Germany, it's absolutely okay to allow your customers to pick the option to leave their parcel with a neighbour if they're not home. But in Spain, you wouldn't do that unless you want to really upset your neighbour. So these are differences which, are subtle but very important in terms of getting it right for that customer. And again, these are complexities which unless you have the experience of selling in those markets, delivering in those markets, you may not know. So again, do your research, speak to your delivery partner, make sure you are offering delivery options that are relevant and localized for that market. And very importantly, delivery works both ways. Now it's, with returns, consumers, sending as much, especially in fashion, the high level of returns that we see and returns is only going to get higher. It's just as important to be thinking about what you're going to be doing with getting parcels back when customers want to return those parcels. And, we see returns being handled in very different ways, ranging from customers wanting us to return parcels to back to the domestic distribution centre in the UK. In some cases, we get parcels returned to a local distribution centre, which then get redistributed or resold in that market. Or sometimes they don't get returned at all and they have options in place, or they have local distributors who then resell them through other channels such as marketplaces. It really does depend on thinking about the value of the product, the cost of returns, and if it makes what makes the most commercial sense. But you must be able to offer a returns option for your customer. We all know that. And last but not least, and this is a bit of a no-brainer, make sure you've chosen the right delivery partner. Tap into the expertise that's available. Look for a partner that is not just going to be selling you carriage or parcels, but actually someone that is going to be a good sounding board, share their delivery expertise, not just what they've learned, but also share what they see other customers doing, what best practices, can help you work out what your game plan should be when it comes to delivery, to make sure that you're not only doing what's right from your business perspective, but also from your customer perspective. And to make sure fundamentally that your delivery approach is an enabler for your international growth and not a barrier. So that's a really important thing. Choose the right delivery partner. Now, we've actually put together an ebook which will give you a more in-depth guide, because the purpose of this webinar was really to give you a taster of some of the key areas for you to be thinking about. But we have got a more in-depth guide. It's a free ebook, How to Grow Global E-commerce Sales with Delivery. And you can download that from our website. So go to gfsdeliver.com, go to the resources and events tab, and you'll be able to download the ebook.
Bobby, while you're
Yeah.
talking about GFS, you've talked quite a lot about the challenges, but you've not really told us what GFS do. For those that don't know, can you just tell us how you can help, or how GFS can help retailers with some of the international delivery challenges?
Sure. Well, I don't want to, go into detail about GFS. You can talk to us. You can go on our website. We're here to answer any questions. But as a very high level introduction, GFS Group, we were established 16 years ago. We are a delivery company. It's everything that we know and do and think and breathe. There are three parts to our business. The core of our business is our managed parcel services anywhere in the world. But we also have the technology to support that, and we also have GFS logistics. So, this is part of what makes us different and unique, is that we're not someone that just will sell a parcel to you or help you get your parcel from A to B, and we're not someone that's just going to give you some of the technology but can't provide any of the services. So, whether that's labeling software or software that enables you to track and trace your parcels. We're not just about technology, and we're certainly not just about logistics. We're all of that and more. So companies come to us because they want us to simplify delivery for them, and to take the hassle away from them. And when I say companies, we work from, like I mentioned at the beginning, with some of the biggest retailers. We're the delivery partner for some of the biggest online retailers, but equally we work with some of the fastest growing online brands as well, anywhere from ranging from 100 parcels per night to thousands of parcels per night. Yeah, that's basically the GFS group and what we do. That I've put one slide on with some background on us, but coming on to the next one, we're a parcels business, managed parcel services. It's everything that we do. Our job is to provide pain-free access to a world of carriers and services, but with the value-added expertise, technology, and proactive customer support that comes with it as part of the service. As I mentioned earlier, e-commerce is one of the biggest areas of our business, fastest growing, and we've developed our own international e-commerce delivery solution. So, Carl, if you're on the line, then listen out, because this is for you. This is an international tracked packet solution with end-to-end visibility. So it provides information both to you and to your customer on where your parcel is on its journey. It's what we feel is a best-in-class solution for the e-commerce market. It's easy to integrate with your IT systems. We can handle anything from small to large volumes of parcels. It gives you your tracking and visibility. It's cost effective. It's reliable. So it gives you the right balance between cost, reliability, also speed, and opens up all the delivery options so that you can give your customer that Amazon style, experience that they've come to expect. So that's a little bit about GFS. Hopefully, it's enough to make you want to go and find out a little bit more about us. So please do go to the website or contact me. My details are on this final slide here. So yes, if there's anything we can do to help, then please do reach out.
So we've got time for some questions. If you'd like to ask a question, if you look at the panel on the side of your screen, you'll be able to click to ask us about international trade. Got a Interesting question here, Bobby. Should you deliver duty paid or just leave it down to the buyer to pay duty for items worth, he said, about £15? Do you have any options or data on what customers prefer, or I'm guessing what sellers prefer is asked. I'm guessing sellers prefer to leave it down to the customer because it's easier.
Yeah.
But it comes back to the international um, tax question, which was the kind of one of the top challenges for selling overseas. So, do customers generally prefer to receive with the duties paid and collected by the seller, or are they happy to pay any tax and duty that's free at the other end?
I think it's not a straightforward answer. I think fundamentally speaking, consumers need transparency of price. Okay, we know that. So if you look at online consumer purchasing behavior, um, they prefer transparent pricing. Um, Nobody wants to buy something online and then get a surprise when the parcel, a surprise note through their door saying your parcel's ready for collection, but you need to pay X amount in order to get it in duties and taxes. So I think you need to offer transparent pricing. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
would say. But it does leave you with the challenge of how do you absorb that cost? Do you pass it on to the customer? Do you absorb it in your profit margin? Where are you going to take that cost, given that you want to make that product as attractive as possible to your consumer? And in markets, in the mature markets like the US market, in China, we know those consumers are really price sensitive. So it does present a challenge, right? It's just more that you've got to try and work out. Um, but from the consumer perspective, I'd say you need to give them transparent pricing, and you need to think about how you incorporate, not only how you're going to absorb that cost or pass it on, but also what technology you're going to use to so that when your customer is at checkout, they've got the goods in their basket, they're about to check out, that they see quite clearly what they're going to be paying in taxes and duties and as part of the price. So you need to also think about how you're going to present taxes and duties in your online checkout.
fantastic. And something else I found very interesting, Bobby, was that obviously we said that China by far is the largest market, followed by the US, and Australia was kind of nowhere near, or not even on the list for the highest value e-commerce markets. But interestingly, second on the list as seen for opportunity. And I'm guessing that's because eBay are very active down there, and people in the UK sell on eBay, and Amazon have opened up, which has brought it to the top of people's radar. And also, obviously, it's a large English-speaking country, so no translation required. But how quickly can people deliver to Australia these days? I know to the large cities it's relatively quickly, but what about the rural areas of Australia? What's a reasonable time delivery expectation?
Well, I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to that, because the answer is I don't, but I know experts that do back in the office. I know that we can get parcels to Australia on an express service. Just, same, 2 days we can get parcels there. I don't know how quickly we can get parcels in the more remote rural areas, but I can certainly find out.
Yeah, so it's literally just a couple of days to get a parcel to Australia, which probably covers the main cities there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very interesting territory, um, and it's somewhat surprising that the second country seen as the second biggest opportunity is possibly the country that's furthest from us. I think only kind of New Zealand might be a tiny bit further away. So big opportunity, but the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
China, I think, is probably back to the sort of the regulation issue why people aren't selling into China because of their insistence that you've got a local entity, etc.
Mm.
So if retailers are looking, the biggest opportunity from your peers so far as outside the UK and Europe is the US.
Yeah, the US certainly, if they're looking to target where the biggest value, if they're looking to target, the the high value, the biggest e-commerce markets where they're not going to have that language barrier, but they're going to be facing other barriers. Competition is going to be fierce. Consumers outside in the US are very savvy and very price sensitive. It's a throwaway culture, so these are all other challenges that they're going to be facing. They could decide that actually their strategy is not to follow what everybody else is doing and actually go the other way and tap into the fast growing e-commerce markets where there's going to be faster growth and perhaps less competition. And
So
that could also
Russia,
be part of the
Brazil,
approach.
Turkey,
Yeah.
the Far East.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're thinking about your strategy, which markets to go into, you've really got to be thinking about, what resources you've got available, how easy or how difficult it is going to be, what level of effort is going to be required to make that sell. And you've got to be looking at, the landscape in those markets, what's the buyer behaviors, your competitors, and the potential appetite for your product. These are all going to be factors which you're going to have to work out.
And the final question on Brexit, which I'm not going to ask you what you think is going to happen because we all know no one actually knows. The question is more around courier services. Do you think the couriers will figure it all out for us, or do you think international retailers selling into the EU are going to have to do all the paperwork themselves? Will technology and couriers solve it for us, or is there a real danger, apart from having to pay the any taxes or sales taxes that are due? But who's going to figure out the customs side of it for us?
Oh, gosh, I don't know, Chris, is a simple answer to that, but I wouldn't want to be in a position where I'm going to be reliant on just, couriers figuring it out. I think we also have a responsibility, certainly at GFS, we have a responsibility to our customers and to everybody else to understand it. I think but it's not simply about duties and taxes. You could be thinking about how can you avoid that. We've got customers who are also looking at setting up physical distribution centers in other locations to find ways around duties and taxes or ways for reducing duties and taxes. um, Again, I would say ask your peers, ask your delivery partner, find out um, what is happening around that and what are the options, and make an informed decision.
So find out as much as you can before it's too late. Bobby, that's all of the questions we've had today. I'd like to really thank you for your time today. It's some very interesting insights. And I know we went through the slides relatively quickly, and there's a ton of useful information in there, particularly on the highest value markets, the fastest growing markets, and the top export markets by product categories. So the slides will be made available, and we'll be making a replay of this webinar available shortly, later this afternoon. It's been recorded. So if you'd like to go back through it in more detail and pause to see each slide, you'll be able to. So Bobby, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Many thanks. We're going to be ending the webinar now, and as I say, we'll make everything available to you shortly. Thanks for your time.